CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Juliet Mann.
And I'm Andrew Wilson. Our top stories. Israel orders a complete siege of the Gaza Strip as the death toll from attacks by Hamas rises to at least 800, while 500 Palestinians inside the enclave have died in retaliatory strikes.
Israel deploys troops near its border with Lebanon as fears grow that the fighting could escalate into a wider regional conflict.
The European Union suspends funding to the Palestinian territories following Hamas's assault on Israel.
And the person who spent decades trying to boost business between China and Spain turns her attention to green technology.
Israel has ordered what it calls a complete siege of the Gaza Strip, cutting off electricity and water supplies, as well as food and fuel.
A record 300,000 Israeli reservists have been drafted after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered an unprecedented retaliation following surprise attacks by Hamas at the weekend. At least 800 Israelis have been killed by the Palestinian armed group. While inside Gaza, more than 500 Palestinians have died as Israel continues to hit back with airstrikes. The Israeli military suggests dozens of people have been taken as captives in Gaza, including children, women and the elderly. Qatar says it's in mediation talks with Hamas and Israeli officials, including over a possible prisoner swap. Our correspondent Paul Hawkins reports.
Gaza, pounded by Israeli artillery, hundreds are dying as Israel reacts to Saturday's atrocity. Keshta, searching through the rubble for his family. Israel has already cut the power here. The water will also be turned off. The cycle of violence continues. Retribution for Saturday's attack, which left at least 700 dead, including 260 at this rave in southern Israel. Gunmen opening fire at will and taking hostages, including this girl, Shani Luke. Her semi-naked, motionless body taken away on a pickup truck, leading to this appeal from her mother. At least 100 hostages were taken to Gaza from 27 areas in southern Israel, including the wife and 2 daughters of this man.
The last 24 hours were very difficult. I tried to stay strong. It's not simple to know that your 2 babies and your wife, your entire family, the most precious thing you have is captive.
Most countries have condemned the attack, including the US, which called it unprecedented and appalling, and China, following a UN Security Council meeting on Sunday.
Really important is to prevent the further escalation of the situation and further casualties of civilians, and also what's also important is really to come back to the 2-state solution and the peace process. We condemn all attacks against the civilians.
In diplomacy, language matters, and more so when talking about one of the world's longest-running and bloodiest conflicts. Hundreds of thousands of Israeli troops line the 60-kilometre Gaza border. At the moment, it's a siege. The world is waiting to see if it'll become an invasion and a journey for everyone into uncharted waters. Paul Hawkins, CGTN.
Well, our correspondent Noor Harazim is in Gaza and joins us live now. Noor, good to talk to you. Gaza continues to be hit by these Israeli airstrikes. What's the situation where you are right now?
There is a new round, a new series of Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. It is an ongoing bombings here in Gaza. We actually lost count of the places where the Israeli airstrikes are targeting. More than 130 airstrikes were launched on the Gaza Strip only in the last hour. Right now, and while I'm speaking to you, I can clearly hear the Israeli naval forces shooting missiles towards Gaza's shores from the east. Israeli warplanes hovering over Gaza, and Israeli strikes hitting Gaza from the air. And at the same time, on the eastern side, we can also hear the Israeli tanks shelling toward the borderline between Gaza and Israel. The situation is really bad. I can say that there is no place safe here in the Gaza Strip because most of the recent strikes were in central Gaza City, targeting ministries, mosques, housing units, residential buildings. The number of casualties, people killed and injured here in Gaza is going very high. The hospitals in Gaza and the Shifa Hospital and the Health Ministry went in a press release this evening saying that the situation in a Shifa Hospital is deteriorating. The fuel will finish in the next few days, which is putting the lives of hundreds and thousands of Palestinians in danger.
Noor, the Israelis are now talking about a total siege of Gaza, cutting off food, water and electricity. Have you seen any evidence of this yet, or how are people reacting to this news?
Well, yes, of course. Gaza Strip is already suffering and almost 15 years Israeli siege. So the Gaza Strip is already suffering from the lack of fuel, food and medical supplies. This announcement will make the things even worse here in Gaza. On the first day, Palestinians managed to go out to the markets and buy some bread and canned food. However, now, as the airstrikes are intensifying, people are rarely going out from their homes. So maybe we are looking at a new humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip, and it might be the worst that the people of Gaza have ever witnessed. People are very scared to go out from their homes to buy anything if they starve of hunger because of the Israeli warplanes for airstrikes. For now, the people are wishing for the Arab League or any Arab country, for example, Jordan, Egypt, to intervene and at least find a truce agreement between Hamas and Israel so they can manage to go out of their homes and buy their needs.
Noor, thanks very much indeed. Noor Harazida, live for us in Gaza.
Well, let's go to Tel Aviv now and speak to our reporter Mohammed Al-Kissim. Mohammed, sirens have been sounding across Israel. Tell us what you've seen, what you've heard so far today.
Several places, not only in the central part of Israel, but also over Jerusalem. There were sirens at least twice today. Missiles landed in several places also south of Jerusalem, near the settlement of Beitar Elite, landed there, and also along Highway 1, one of the main highways in Israel, just to the west of Jerusalem, on the way to Tel Aviv. Another missile landed there. Also, a rocket landed at a mosque in an Arab town called Abu Ghosh. No serious casualties. No one was killed in these rockets, but just it goes to show you that Hamas and the other Palestinian factions are still capable of firing rockets onto Israel. In fact, earlier in the day, a rocket landed at a parking lot at the airport, bringing business at the airport to a halt for at least half an hour until the situation was secure enough to resume airport work. But sirens still sounding throughout the southern part of Israel, as well as at some times in central Israel and over the city of Jerusalem.
Mohammed, let's talk about what's happening in the north, because Israel's gathering troops for what it's described as the largest operation ever.
Well, that has been the second main topic in the last few days. The first one is the major, massive military operation in the south, but also there has been fears among many, including the United States, that another front may erupt and Israel has to fight in two different areas. Yesterday there were two minor skirmishes, but they were major in terms of scope, because if Hezbollah retaliates to Israeli artillery fires, and Israel continues to retaliate when it's targeted, we may see a full-fledged military confrontation between the two foes, which could create major trouble for Israel, and it also could ease the pressure on the Gaza Strip. Yesterday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the U.S. is doing all it can, everything in its power, to make sure that the second front does not open up, meaning Hezbollah. But the more days go by with minor skirmishes, at some point these minor skirmishes, minor tit-for-tat kind of situation may explode and spark a wider military confrontation.
Mohammed Al-Qasim in Tel Aviv, thank you very much for that update.
The European Union has suspended all aid payments to Palestinian organisations following the attack by Hamas on Israel and the ensuing violence. Foreign ministers will meet on Tuesday to discuss the crisis. Our correspondent Alex Cadier is live for us now in Brussels. Alex, the European Commission suspending aid funding then. Talk us through that decision.
Yeah, well, we heard from the EU's Neighbourhood and Enlargement Commissioner Oliver Varhelyi announcing this on X, formerly known as Twitter, and saying that it was really no time for the EU to continue as business as usual. Now, we're talking about $700 million worth of aid that goes through the UN, through other charities to help a variety of Palestinian organizations and charities. Some of it goes directly to the Palestinian Authority to help pay the salaries of civil servants and to help run the Palestinian Authority. And part of the reason for that suspension was explained by the Commissioner, saying that the foundations for peace, tolerance and coexistence must now be addressed. Incitement to hatred, violence and glorification of terror have poisoned the minds of too many. So quite cryptic there. The question is whether or not the EU worries that perhaps some of that money has ended up in the wrong hands. Well, Eric Mamer, the spokesperson for the European Commission, earlier today in a briefing saying that there were very strict systems in place to make sure that money did not get to Hamas and other prescribed organizations. So the EU, quite a dramatic move, actually, quite a serious move, starving that funding, cutting off all of that funding to the Palestinian organizations, about $300 million worth last year given from the EU. Now, all of those will be reviewed, and that funding will be reviewed and stopped until further notice. So certainly a very significant move, but that is one aspect of it. We've also seen a lot of solidarity expressed from the European Commission. Josep Borrell, the EU's top diplomat, condemning what he called heinous attacks against Israel. And we saw similar condemnation from President Macron of France, Olaf Scholz of Germany, Pedro Sanchez of Spain, Giorgia Meloni in Italy. So certainly a lot of solidarity for Israel and certainly rethinking that relationship with Palestine.
And the foreign ministers from the EU putting their heads together tomorrow. Can we expect their public comments to continue in that vein?
Yeah, a lot of those foreign ministers joining Josep Borrell, the EU's top diplomat, who's on a visit to Oman. They will fly there to meet him, some of them joining remotely as well. Now, one of the things that will come up is that announcement that we were just talking about by Commissioner Varhelyi will actually have come as a bit of a surprise to some of the member states. Not all of them were consulted. They thought they might be consulted at the ministerial meeting tomorrow on Tuesday, and so that was one of the aspects that will be discussed. Is actually not all of the member states were briefed about this announcement, and some of them behind the scenes saying, well, we're not sure about the legal basis on which the Commission thinks it can do this single-handedly. So that will be one of the topics of discussion, certainly making sure that European Union response, member state response is coordinated across the board. But certainly the geopolitical ramifications of the violence in Israel, in Gaza, will certainly have a real sense of concern for the EU, making sure the knock-on effects are mitigated against and making sure the European interests in the Middle East and around the world are preserved. That's one aspect. And finally, a lot of EU ministers, particularly Eastern European ministers, will be very keen to make sure the world's focused is still, some of the world's focus remains on the war at Europe's doorstep in Ukraine. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is still very much active and very much front of mind, front of the concerns of European ministers, and they want to make sure that they reiterate and maintain their support for Ukraine as well. So a very packed agenda, a very busy time for those EU ministers responding to this crisis.
Alex, thanks very much indeed. Alex Cadier live for us there in Brussels.
Still to come on CGTN, we look at how global markets are reacting to the escalating crisis in the Middle East.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos and unicorn companies. Make sense of it all with global business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, the deepening conflict between Israel and Palestine is having an impact on global markets. It's creating more volatility for investors, adding to uncertainty ahead of corporate earnings seasons and crucial US inflation data later this week. Well, our correspondent John Terrett's at the New York Stock Exchange. Good to see you, John. I mean, investors, they're probably trying to get their heads around what is going on in Israel, then the developments that are driving those market reactions. What are the key questions they're asking themselves?
Well, Juliet and Andrew, I first of all would like to say that everybody here recognises the extraordinary magnitude of what we're dealing with now and the thousands of people who have died, the thousands of people who are injured, and of course the many hostages whose whereabouts is not known. We're very well aware of that here, I promise you. That said, the markets are open, so they must be reported. And I think we opened this morning with the expected sell-off. When the news broke early in the morning in New York on Saturday, we knew there would be a sell-off on Monday, and there has been, although, as I'll illustrate in a second, the markets have been popping into the green, but they're mostly in the red, which I think is understandable. And you're quite right, Juliet. What you say is absolutely right. Investors at the most senior level are struggling to understand exactly what's gone on. And it's not so much what happened over the weekend and the short term, it's really what happens over the medium term that I think will affect stock prices here. Now, there are two key things that are overhanging everything at the moment. One is the Suez Canal. Now, as you know, the Suez Canal is in the region, very close to where all this is going on, and the concern is that the whole thing will be expanded, as you were saying earlier in the program, into a much more regional conflict than it already is. And the Suez Canal is responsible for energy and commodities and consumer goods and components. It links Asia with Europe, and of course it completely slices Africa off from Asia. So that is a problem. No sign that the Suez Canal is involved at the moment, but it could be. The other much more serious problem for investors on Wall Street is Iran. Now, Iran exports a lot of oil to Asia. And to a certain extent, the Biden administration has been turning a blind eye to this. Now, as you know, it gets complicated and messy here, but there were sanctions against Iran. Then they were lifted. Iran is said to have been enriching 60% of the uranium it needs for a nuclear bomb. Then there was that deal at the beginning of the General Assembly where the Americans let them have $6 million in a Qatari bank in return for American hostages. So it's all a bit messy, but Iran is a big problem because of that export of oil to Asia. And the worry is, will Iran be dragged in? Now, the Wall Street Journal today is reporting that Iran did work with Hamas on planning this event that happened on Saturday morning, and that the green light was given by Tehran last Monday. Now, this is only a Wall Street Journal report, but it is out there. Oil is presently up about $3, which is about 3%. Luckily, the bond market is closed today for the major holiday of Columbus Day, which is a big Italian holiday, and these days an indigenous people's holiday, so no bonds to worry about, but we do have the stock, let me tell you. So the Dow has been down for most of the day, popping into the green. It's currently in the green by 29 points, which is not very much. S&P 500 is also in the green by the slimmest amount, and as I said just now, oil is up around $3, around 3%, and I think a lot of people here anticipate that it will head to $100 quite soon, which is where it's been before. Yeah. It's not uncharted territory for oil to be at that price.
So I think I know half of the answer. You know, oil stocks, gas stocks. But which other share prices have been affected so far?
Well, again, it is that terrible conundrum that we have on Wall Street of talking about this when there is such an event of such magnitude taking place. But, you know, life goes on and we have to do it. And the terrible truth is that war is very good for economies sometimes, or certainly sectors in economies. So here we go with the defense stocks. The defense stocks doing really well now. We've got Northrop Grumman up 11%, Lockheed Martin 8%, and Raytheon up 5%. And the energy sector is the best performer so far, with Chevron up 3% and Exxon ahead by 4%. And then consumer discretionary, as you would understand, not doing so well. This is things like Airbnb, the cruise lines and the airlines. People simply anxious about traveling now, when travel was just getting go again. So Airbnb down 1%, Carnival Cruises down 6%, Norwegian down 5%, and the airlines down 5% each. That's Delta, American and United. And of course, the concern there is higher oil prices affecting their profits. Finally, there was chatter on the television here this morning about the possibility of Israeli company stocks not doing very well. One thinks of Palantir, which is an Israeli cybersecurity company backed by the CIA. They have in Israel lots of cybersecurity companies and lots of specialist drug companies as well. Now, at the moment, I don't think those stocks are being affected, but obviously going forward, medium term, to bring us back to the beginning, you know, we just don't know, and, you know, we'll just have to wait and see.
John Terrett at the New York Stock Exchange, thank you very much. Well, let's bring in Matt Maley now. He's the Chief Market Strategist at Miller Tarbeck. Matt, look, it's neither Israel nor Gaza are oil-producing countries. So why have energy prices jumped?
Well, Juliette, I think the main concern, of course, is this connection between Iran and what's going on with Hamas. And if this thing does escalate in any kind of meaningful way to a regional situation, especially if it's a direct conflict between Israel and Iran, that will definitely have a big impact on oil prices. And there'll be sanctions on Iran. I mean, there's no question that the U.S. right now is showing full support, as they have in the past, for Israel, and that that will hurt some of the sanctions and some of the issues that we've talked about with some of the sanctions being taken off recently. They could be put right back on, and therefore it could become a big problem. And we've already had a situation where oil prices had come down a little bit, but the Saudis have for a long time now have been saying that they want to, and indicating they want to keep oil prices elevated. So this all kind of coming together at a tough time.
And what about the rush to things like the dollar, to gold, to other safe haven assets? What are you expecting there?
Well, I think we'll see more of it. I mean, gold is up quite a bit today. Yeah. Part of that has to do with it was so oversold and it had not been acting well. But the dollar has been strong recently, and really for many months now. And so the bounce there isn't as big. But you know, right now, I think overall, you look at what's going on in the global bond markets. There isn't a really big flight to safety move today. There's a lot of it's a move, but not a big one, except for the one in gold. And I think as people get more, I guess my point is I think the stock market especially is a little too complacent right now. I think that there are some more issues that we need to pull out there. I mean, people are saying, geez, just because the stock market is acting okay, therefore this situation isn't going to deteriorate. And I'm like, well, the markets are not a good indicator of what the political leaders decisions they're going to make. So people need to be a little more careful, in my opinion.
So, I mean, geopolitical risks are heightened. Do you think that they tend to be short-lived? Are they going to linger long? You talk about that complacency. I wonder how it's going to play out.
Well, in times past where we've seen these big spikes in oil prices because of geopolitical concerns, they tend to come right back down quite quickly. I'm not so sure that should be the case this time because, again, oil hasn't spiked in a big way. It's only up a couple of dollars. And again, I mean, remember what the markets predicted when President Putin amassed a big army on the Ukrainian border. Everybody said, don't worry, it's just a show of force. He's not going to do anything. And, of course, he did. And the markets, which were already under pressure anyway, got hit quite hard. So I think that investors should be a little bit more careful here until we get a better feeling about what exactly.
Matt Maley, Martin Miller Tabak, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Shares in Britain's Metro Bank have surged 24% after the troubled lender agreed a rescue deal. Metro says it's raised nearly $400 million of new investment and refinanced over $700 million of debt. And that follows days of speculation over the state of the bank's finances. Metro was founded in 2010 and was the first new bank to open in the UK in over 100 years.
British high-end retailer Waitrose is reportedly in talks to sell products via Amazon. It comes after some other British supermarkets struck partnership deals with the US tech giant. Waitrose is hoping the move will increase its flagging market share, which has been falling steadily for the last 3 years.
China says it aims to boost its computing power by more than 50% by 2025. It's currently second in the world behind the United States. The increased power will be required to support applications in industries, including finance and education. It's also seen as key for supporting the development of artificial intelligence.
A cargo train has left Shanghai heading for Munich, the first ever direct express service. It's carrying goods to Europe worth around $27 million. The journey is going to take 17 days, which is around a third of the time it takes for cargo to be sent by sea.
The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank are holding a summit in Morocco just weeks after a powerful earthquake killed nearly 3,000 people. The annual gatherings held away from Washington every 3 years. This is the first meeting in Africa for half a century. Developing countries have called for both organizations to be reformed and for more money to deal with the impact of climate disasters.
An American professor has won the Nobel Prize for Economics. Claudia Goldin conducted groundbreaking research which explored gender inequality in the workplace with a focus on the wage gap between men and women. Goldin is the third woman to win the Economics Prize since 1969.
You can get highlights, of course, from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN's Storyboard email newsletter. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
Coming up on CGTN, French and German leaders meet for 2 days of talks in Hamburg, aimed at healing the rift in key policy areas.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference?
Brazen axe.
The difference is in the detail, the background,
Defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Juliet Mann and me, Andrew Wilson. The headlines again. Israel orders a complete siege of the Gaza Strip as the death toll from attacks by Hamas rises to at least 800. More than 500 Palestinians inside the enclave have also died in retaliatory strikes.
Israel deploys troops near its border with Lebanon as fears grow that the fighting could escalate into a wider regional conflict.
Germany's southern state of Bavaria has voted to keep its centre-right coalition government for another 5 years. But the far right also saw its support surge to a new high.
The state is seen as a barometer of public mood due to the size of its population. Natalie Carney reports from Munich.
Bavarians like their traditions, from lederhosen to beer to the Christian Social Union. The party that has become synonymous with the Alpine state came in on top of Sunday's election with 37% of the votes. However, that proved to be a new low for Chairman Markus Söder and his centre-right party that has long dominated over the Bavarian state government.
Do you think politics in Bavaria need to change? I mean, the CSU has...
No. Our land, unser Land in guter Hand, our land is in good hand. And our Prime Minister Markus Söder.
I think Dr. Markus Söder is really good. He's perhaps a bit of a one-man show, so you could say there aren't a lot of people beside him.
Markus Söder's CSU have been angling themselves to maintain their historic position as the most influential party in Bavaria. And while they've managed to do so for now, that influence is waning.
The CSU will again have to contend with the coalition government and their likely junior partner, the incumbent Free Voters, who they have been governing Bavaria with since 2018. This loosely put together centre-right populist party of independents increased their voter base by more than 4%, winning 15.8%. Another big winner of Sunday's election is the far-right Alternative for Deutschland, or AfD, who came in third with 14.6%. Their best results yet in Bavaria. Despite this, a coalition with them is unlikely.
The other parties have said they don't want to talk to us. We would be very happy if they did talk to us, but of course we would also insist that our views are accepted. That means we need better housing policy, better infrastructure. Above all, we need better security policy in terms of border protection, asylum and migration.
The AfD also made notable gains in the state of Hesse, bringing in 16.8% of voters there, where elections were also held over the weekend, an indicator of the changing pulse of the German voters in general, say experts.
The AfD, or so-called Alternative for Germany, was founded on scepticism of the European Union against the euro and received a great boost from the so-called migration crisis of 2015 and 2016. You vote for the AfD if you're against migration, because you're worried that jobs might be lost, because you've something against the supposed establishment.
Weil man Sorge hat, dass womöglich Arbeitsplätze verloren gehen, weil man etwas gegen die da oben hat, gegen das angebliche Establishment.
And that dissatisfaction with the establishment in Berlin was apparent. All three parties in the governing coalition saw their support fall in Bavaria. While the state government will likely stay the same for the next 5 years, there will certainly be a louder voice coming from the far right. Natalie Carney, CGTN, in Munich.
President Emmanuel Macron is in Germany with his cabinet for annual talks amid strained relations between Europe's two biggest economies. There have been disagreements over the economy and energy policy, and most notably, defence, highlighted by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Discussions will also focus on the issue of migration. Well, our correspondent Peter Oliver is in Berlin and joins us now live. Peter, good to talk to you. Why have these talks come at this particular point, and what are they hoping to achieve?
Well, they'd made a promise, the French and German governments, that their cabinets would get together once every 6 months. They met last in January of this year. So they're not exactly making the 6-month target, but they're there or thereabouts, 9-10 months out. What they're looking to talk about is, well, to try and find some of the common ground that is so lacking in the relationship at the moment, the public-facing relationship between Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor. There's not really that clicking relationship that existed when Angela Merkel was the incumbent of the Chancellor's office, the relationship that she had with the French presidents that took up their position in the Élysée Palace during her tenure in the Kanzleramt. What we are seeing, though, is disagreements over the future of a new European fighter jet, big disagreements over the future of a French and German policy to put together a new European tank. That's gone on for years now, and it's cost a lot of money already. Put it this way, the German defence minister has said that he hopes that by the end of this year, it's been going on since 2017, they can work out which parts of the tank each different country will work on. So yes, they are a little behind on that one. There is also disputes over energy policy as well, because France is very much a pro-nuclear power state. Germany, very much anti-nuclear power. France generates around 70% of its electricity from nuclear energy, and there is a huge energy reform meeting taking place at the European level just next week on the 17th, and we are a long way from a unified position in the European Union. Basically, France and Germany at loggerheads. What the Germans want is they want to know that France isn't going to over-subsidise nuclear energy power, nuclear electricity generated by nuclear power. I got there in the end. And that there is going to be a set price on a unit of electricity generated that way. France hasn't been very keen to do that. It's been trying to drum up support, particularly from Hungary and Poland, both countries that use a lot of nuclear energy. We are hoping that at this meeting and a lovely sunset cruise around Hamburg Harbour on this Monday evening, that they will be able to find some kind of olive branch. It doesn't seem awfully likely, though.
And Peter, there's no avoiding the new urgent priority, and that's the Israel-Palestine situation. Do you think the two cabinets will find agreement on that?
Yes. Well, there will certainly, I imagine, be a joint statement when the two leaders take their press conference on Tuesday morning. What we have seen is that both countries have put out messages of support for Israel so far. We've also seen both countries taking part in their roles as EU member states in cutting aid that will be going to the Palestinian territories. The EU announcing they'll be cutting suspending $730 million worth of aid, and that will come under review. The German development minister has also said that they're going to be suspending all of the German aid that went to the Palestinian territories, and that's going to come under review. A similar message came out of Austria. What we have seen, though, following the ongoing situation in Israel is that in France, synagogues have had extra security placed in front of them. On my way to the studio here in Berlin, I walked past the Holocaust Memorial in central Berlin near the Brandenburg Gate. There was no visible extra security there, but we do already have security in front of synagogues and Jewish cultural centres here in Berlin and in Germany.
Peter, thanks very much indeed. Peter Oliver there in Berlin for us. Now, Ukraine's president has appealed to NATO to rally against terror and aggression. Volodymyr Zelensky made the comments during a meeting of the alliance following the Hamas attack on Israel. He confirmed that 2 Ukrainian citizens were among the dead.
It comes as Russian shelling in Kherson over the weekend killed 2 people. Kyiv is warning of a record number of drone attacks by Moscow over the winter. Well, our correspondent Megumi Lim is in Kyiv.
Well, obviously, Ukraine was very high on the agenda at the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, but of course, Israel was also a huge focus. And President Zelensky was very clear in his condemnation against Hamas's attack on Israel as he addressed the NATO Parliamentary Assembly via video link. He said we must not give terror a single chance. And he also drew some parallels between Hamas and Russia. He said that Hamas has used a similar tactic as Russia has. And he said that the world can agree on a set of definitions defining what terrorism is. He said, do not rape women, do not kill, do not consider children as trophies, and do not fill villages and towns with blood. And as this conflict has continued on, Zelensky may have also made an indirect reference to Republicans in the U.S. Congress as they continue to feud over how to choose their next House Speaker. He said that this is not the time to withdraw from the international arena into internal disputes.
Senior politicians in Russia are discussing whether or not to revoke the ratification of a ban on nuclear weapons testing.
It comes after President Vladimir Putin hinted the country could resume nuclear testing for the first time in more than 3 decades. Dasha Chernyshova has the latest from Moscow.
The lawmakers from the Russian State Duma are getting back to their lawmaking activities, and they have a lot of legislations and bills on their agenda. Among them, they are expected to discuss the possible de-ratification of the treaty which bans the testing of the nuclear-powered weapons. Now, we understand this is coming obviously after the remarks made by the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has been talking about the potential use by Russia of the nuclear weapons. He was suggesting that the United States has not ratified that CTBT, the treaty. It was signed by both Moscow and Washington, but Moscow has ratified it in 2000, and Washington still has not ratified it. So the understanding among the senior Russian politicians is that the possible revocation of this ratification would signal to the United States that they will be on par at the same legislative level. This is the so-called lawmaking parity. We also understand that the Russian politicians are talking about this possibility to make it clear to the United States that this is unacceptable. There has to be the parity. At the same time, the Kremlin was very carefully speaking about this issue, suggesting that it does not mean that Moscow is willing to get back to this nuclear testing. Moscow just wants to have this parity.
Rescuers in Afghanistan are continuing to search for victims from the 6.3 magnitude earthquake that struck on Saturday. The Taliban says at least 2,400 people have died. Roads remain blocked and teams are struggling to reach the remote areas of the western Herat province. The UN and other aid organisations are working to provide humanitarian supplies.
A UK plan to deport migrants to Rwanda has now reached the Supreme Court after previously being declared unlawful. Government wants to remove people who arrive in the country without permission and insists they would be treated humanely in the African nation. The Court of Appeal had earlier ruled that Rwanda couldn't be considered a safe third country.
China's largest vaccine company, Zhifei, has signed a $3 billion deal with British drug maker GSK. It gives Zhifei the exclusive right to sell GSK's top-selling vaccine for shingles, which will be distributed to 30,000 locations across China. More than 1.5 million people aged over 50 suffer from shingles every year in China.
Luxembourg's Conservatives are set for a return to power after the ruling coalition failed to win a majority in weekend elections. The Liberals, Socialists and Green Party have jointly ruled for a decade, but a collapse in support for the Greens saw the coalition's overall numbers fail to hit the threshold needed for government.
Buying your own home for just $1 may sound too good to be true, but it's something Italy's been trying to as it tries to repopulate abandoned villages.
Now, some mayors say the 12-year-old scheme, which has spread to 70 towns across the country, has been successful. Our correspondent Hermione Kitson now reports.
If you're in the market for a new home and your very own piece of medieval history, look no further. This house in the Sicilian mountaintop town of Ganji can be yours for just $1.
Here we're on the ground floor where there was the animal stall to keep the animals that people needed to survive at that time.
While you might need a lot of imagination to see the potential, there's no doubting it's a great opportunity.
Being a medieval village, the houses weren't developed on one level but on multiple levels. So usually upstairs there's the bedroom and on the last floor the kitchen.
The initiative is aimed at repopulating abandoned villages across Italy.
The only obligation is that within 3 years they must renovate the house. They're not obliged to be a resident or be here for a particular amount of time. They can also make it into a business, such as a B&B or hotel.
Diego and Roberta Puglisi have bought 2 $1 houses in Ganji.
In respect to other beautiful villages, Ganji has a cultural liveliness that is different. For example, in the summer there are always performances in the piazza that are of a high standard.
While the scheme is popular with Italians, it's been a hit with overseas investors.
There are many people who come from all over Europe, but there's also someone who comes from Canada and our friend who comes from America. People arrive from everywhere.
After Ganji was declared one of the most beautiful towns in Italy, there was a boom in sales, and 170 of its dilapidated houses have now been renovated. Mayor Giuseppe Ferrarello says the village has a new identity.
Just this year we organised a party of all those who bought a house as part of the initiative so that they could meet each other and share their experiences. They've integrated well into the community.
Italy's $1 house initiative started here in Ganji 12 years ago, and since then it's expanded to more than 70 towns across the country.
In Sicily, there are 30 towns where you can buy a house for $1, while on the mainland there are 20 towns in southern Italy, 12 in central Italy, 7 in northern Italy and 5 on the island of Sardinia. Roberta says it's a wise investment.
It's a good life, yes.
And for a view like this, $1 seems like a bargain. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Ganji, Sicily.
You're watching Global Business on CGTN. Still to come, the person who spent decades trying to boost business between China and Spain turns her attention to green technology.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw. The cleanup operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So into the attention of world leaders.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
And in these mountains, they recently finished building a power plant.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. They're the people who've spent their lives trying to bring China and Europe closer together, the bridge builders. To mark the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative, we've been travelling through Europe to meet them.
Margaret Chen has spent the last 20 years promoting business exchanges between China and Spain. And now she's eyeing green investments in the country, partnered with Chinese technology.
My name is Margaret Chen, in Chinese, Chen Hong. I am the founder of China Club Spain, and I'm also CEO of Optimus Horizon, which is a company dedicated to build China-Spain relation. I've been living in Spain for the last 30 years. I was born in Shanghai in the 60s. I went into Jiao Tong University, which is, for us, that time, the best engineering university in Shanghai. Later, I got a scholarship from one of the energy center of US, which is located in Tennessee. There, I was able to work with a software company. They were building the first electronic commerce platform for the whole world, so it was a very exciting project. When I was living in US, I met my husband. He's Spaniard. Spain, that time for Chinese, is a very unknown destiny, for Chinese to be there. When I first arrived to Spain, that time China was still quite backward comparatively, So Spain has this fund and the project to help China. Starting from '96, Telefonica, which was #1 company for many years, they wanted to get into this electronic commerce and the internet environment. And that period of time was just the growing period for the telecom industry. And I actually was the director for electronic commerce for the mobile service.
Conference so agrees.
In 2001, China was admitted to the World Trade Organization. So suddenly China becomes quite important because of the population, because of the growth, the market. So Telefonica started to look towards China to see how we can actually work with China. The partnership with China Netcom in that moment later becomes China Unicom because Netcom Unicom merged. That was an important moment for Chinese company to be in the international world because Chinese company need to provide service for international phone calls, for example, for the mobile service, so this win-win collaboration. We make Chinese ministry to understand how we work, our standard, both technically and also morally. Our relationship with the China Netcom or China Unicom later was quite fluent because of all this communication. The last 10 years, it is the other way around. Now I have more work to help Chinese company to land in Spain and to help them to adapt culturally, both the normal culture and the corporate culture. One of the companies that I helped in the very beginning was Huawei. Huawei came here after they explored Latin America countries, and they find out that Spain is the bridge of their big business, with Telefonica as a big client. So I was able to help them to put the right person in contact in the right moment. So they were able to tap into the Spanish market, and later I became their official consultant to help them for their business strategy and the logistics and management. Huawei later became employer of more than 1,000 employees, and they actually contributed, to the job market. The Belt and Road Initiative started from 2013. In the very beginning, we see this is concentrated on infrastructure, and now it is more in the renewable energy. I am now helping lots of investment from China to Spain. That's what Spain needed to build solar power plant, for example, because Spain, it has this geographic advantage of the sunlight, of the wind, so it is one of the countries that in Europe that can actually develop a lot in the renewable energy. I started working here, and I find it quite difficult in the very beginning, because first, engineering field, let's say it's male-dominated field, and then as an Asian woman here, it's especially unique. Top-level companies or Fortune 500 companies, there are very few foreigners, There is always a glass ceiling that you feel like you cannot break it. But I think that Spain has improved a lot, The society now becomes more open. So I feel much more comfortable right now than, of course, 30, 20 years ago. 2 years ago, I know that I was listed or ranked as first 100 Chinese to have the international influence. I'm very proud because in this list we also see Ren Zhengfei of Huawei. We see Cao Dewang. He's the giant to make the glass. And I think for me it is encouragement for me to do more things, So I really, I'm happy to be listed, and I try to do more. In recent years, it is getting more complicated geopolitics-wise. Right now, I think it is more than ever we need to speak out. We need to let people know about the development of China, the contribution of China to the rest of the world. I want to contribute to the win-win between Spain and China, and between China and Europe. I can help them to understand each other, to know what they need and how they can be complementary. We should get together to help create a bigger and more productive global economy. Instead of fighting each other, we need to build more bridges than the walls. Humanity needs to build together, to work together, and to get better life together.
Well, you can find out more about our Bridge Builders series on CGTN's website and across our social media channels.
Time for a reminder of our headlines. Israel orders a complete siege of the Gaza Strip as the death toll from attacks by Hamas rises to at least 800, while more than 500 Palestinians inside the enclave have died in retaliatory strikes. Israel orders a complete siege of the Gaza Strip.
Same. So the European Union suspends funding of the Palestinian territories following Hamas's assault on Israel.
Well, that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
There's
more on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok.
Because you can go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Coming up next on CGTN Africa Live. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all the team in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.